Welcome to the Hundredth Monkey Radio with Tom, Elifie, and Greg tonight. And we've got a treat for you guys. This is going to be an interesting show. As you guys know, we did a show here a few weeks ago on with a guy that is doing a lot of research into the flat Earth. And when I started looking at his videos, I came across some other stuff that just kind of blew my mind. You know, I've looked into the stuff in the sky has been a fascination for me for a long time. I've got myself a little telescope, and I consider myself a real novice amateur astronomer. So you know, I have fun looking at the moon and the planets and the sun and those sorts of things. And I've seen some pretty bizarre stuff. If you guys listen to us for any length of time, you've probably heard me talk about some of the weird shit I've seen on the moon itself. But we've got somebody who's been doing an amazing job out there, filming and photographing some stuff in our skies, and there is some really amazing stuff going on. And some of the conclusions that are being drawn, I won't necessarily say conclusions, but there's some theories that are being built with evidence that are really making me personally sit back and think. We've got with us tonight Crrow's 777. He's a YouTuber that is, I believe he's down in San Diego. Is that right, Crrow?
That's correct.
A Southern California area, and he's, you know, I'm not going to read through the bio. If you guys want to read the bio, you are welcome to read through it. It's right in the info tab right below wherever you're listening to this at. But he has really got me thinking, and all of us here. Me, Elifie, and Greg, all three of us have been really chomping at the bit to talk to this guy. So, Crrow, welcome to the Hundredth Monkey Radio.
Thanks for having me. And my main goal in life is to become the 100th monkey. So I guess this is apropos.
All right. So, you know, okay, you know, I kind of didn't really give much of a bio though. So, would you give a little bit of your background and on, you know, what I guess pertaining to what you're doing right now with the videos that you're taking?
Okay, basically I bought my first scope that mattered, an 8-inch Meade Classic back in the 90s. It was a little bit before Hale-Bopp showed up in the skies back then, or what we were told was Hale-Bopp. Fast forward, my equipment has gotten better. In 2012, I was viewing the supermoon of that year with my family optically. We saw, well, my nephew saw black triangles going across, and he hollered out. Sure enough, we all got up and took a turn. For 2 or 3 hours, we watched these boomerang-shaped things transit the moon, staying in between us and the moon. You know, the moon moves, apparently, from our point of view. So this went on, and at the end of the night, we saw 5 to 7 in formation, and it was the next day that I was out getting stuff I needed to film. And as luck would have it, sometime later I filmed one of those boomerangs, which is up on my channel. But that's basically how all this started, and I have been filming nonstop since 2012.
What are you using for gear right now that you're filming with?
The latest stuff that I'm using is a 12-inch Celestron, and I would also mention for all viewers that are interested in doing this, I swore by Meade for years. Unfortunately, the quality of Meade is not what it once was. I would steer anyone away from Meade right now. If you're interested in doing this, at least look at Celestron and wait for Meade. They've just been bought again. Maybe they'll come back bigger and better, but right now, steer clear. I'm using the 12-inch Celestron. I have a solar scope, which is a Coronado. I just got a double stack for that, which will add quite a bit of detail to the solar work I do. I use a DSLR camera. Currently, I'm using a Nikon D800E. And that's pretty much it.
Wow. So the one video that caught my eye in particular was the lunar wave. Now, you know, I've actually when I was, oh geez, this was 3 or 4 years ago. I was out in the backyard looking at the moon, and I think it was about 3/4 full, and I noticed some ripples along the edge that just seemed to be a wave in itself. What I was seeing with my eye through the telescope, but yeah, I kind of wrote it off to atmospheric distortions, you know. So Is there any possibility that this wave that you photographed or you filmed could be something that's atmospheric?
No, typically what you just described, having seen, is typically described as what amateur astronomers call seeing, whether the seeing is good or not. And basically what that comes down to is just turbulence, heat exchange, things like this, just kind of rippling out your image. The 2012 footage that was the first known footage of the lunar wave is nothing like that. And actually there's evidence that demonstrates that atmosphere is not a possible explanation. One of the pieces of evidence is that a video engineer showed me that there was enough ambient light. I think it was shot near 8:30 at night in September. There was enough ambient light in the clip that he used gamma, luma, and noise to demonstrate that the wave does not cross the video frame. It's just local to the moon. And there is more evidence than that. There's an energy pulse and kind of a energy sweep that occurs right as the wave is beginning. And you can see the curvature of all these lines, and it's pretty much been concluded that this wave is local to the moon, and that's where we're at right now.
Are you the only one that's caught this?
No. There are 7 individuals that I am aware of now who have filmed it. The 2012 footage that I just mentioned is head and shoulders, miles better than anything we've seen since. And just the way I shot it, because I tend to shoot the moon on a full-frame video, so you get, almost the entire moon in frame. Some of the other views are closer up, partial moon. I just predicted that after we cleared the equinox here, a week ago or so, that there was a good chance we were going to see activity. And sure enough, a gentleman in Houston who caught the wave once before with a close view filmed a nice wide shot like I do. We'd been talking, and he did everything. He shot it the way I told him he should. The quality is good, so he shot that just a few nights ago after the equinox. And I kind of got lost there. Did I scramble that question? Sorry.
No, that was really good. So when we see that wave go across the moon, you said that so it can't be anything in the atmosphere. The wave itself has a bend to it, or has a bow to it, or it looks like it's wrapping around it.
Yes.
So
it actually does have a measurable bow, and also when it clears the equator. In the 2012 footage, it begins at the bottom. For those who haven't seen it, the wave always comes in pairs. Every legitimate capture of the wave has been 2 waves. When it clears the equator, there is a measurable bow, and again, a video engineer demonstrated this. It looks like just a pixel or 2 to us, but the point is at distance, those pixels would have a pretty big value.
Yeah. What about the energy bursts that are caught in the videos?
So that's a crazy thing, because I had the clip for quite a while, and just by chance one night we were looking at it again, because every time you look at this thing, it kind of boggles your mind. I mean, I still get blown away to this day every time I look at it. We had it up on a 62-inch plasma TV, and we had the lights down, and everyone noticed that there was like this, it almost looked like something cloaked going across the bottom of the moon right as the wave was starting. By then I had better editing tools, so I quickly got in the editor, and I used brightness, contrast, and find edge filters, and we could see there is, in fact, an energy pulse that originates in the lower left limb of the moon right as the wave is beginning at the bottom, and that is followed by a lateral pulse that goes left to right. The crazy thing is when you use the find edge filter, you can see the curvature of the lines as if the energy is sweeping over a sphere. So that's pretty much the best description I can give of the energy pulse.
Are you catching any flack for putting these videos out?
Oh, sure. Unfortunately, when I don't surf, I have a degree in internet technology, so I've never been really into social media or these other things because I spent so many years in front of a computer. Third video up on my channel when I finally did this, or something like that, second or third, or one of the very first ones was the lunar wave, and almost out of the gate, I got a lot of attention that I wasn't expecting.
Probably, I'm guessing shill because, I've seen it myself with the shows that we do. Depending on the subject matter and the content of the show, it kind of I don't know, I kind of gauge you can almost gauge the importance of the show or how close we hit the mark, I think, from the number of shills that pop out of the woodwork.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head. And one thing you notice is tone and tenor. When people clearly are going to disagree with what you've done, you know, if I'm looking at something and I don't care for it, I move on down the road and I spend no more energy. But what you find is these people come out of the gate just very brash, often rude, often worse. And, you know, it's like you said, you can tell, it's very telling. You know who they are from the first couple of sentences.
So what do you think this wave is? What do you think is going on up there? Have you got any kind of ideas yourself?
Yeah, I do. You know, for well over a year, I was pretty sure I knew kind of what I was looking at. Not everything about it, not how or who or any of these things, but what it actually probably is doing. And all that time, I didn't say it because it was just my word. And then over time, we got 7 other individuals. I captured the wave 5 times in total. Just after the fall equinox of 2012, 3 nights before a full moon, I caught it. Didn't see it again, nonstop filming, until the spring equinox of 2014, when I caught the other 4 captures right in that time of year. From the outset, I had been saying that this was related to the time, to the phase of the moon that is near full, and that it was related to equinoxes. I just kind of understood that from the beginning. Well, I had a message sent to me kind of anonymously, and it was in Russian, and when I translated it, the first thing that struck my eye was the words lunar hologram. And so as I deciphered this message using Bing, there were 3 people in kind of maybe a chat room, a European-style Facebook or a chat room, and there appear to be a couple guys and maybe 1 gal, and 2 of the guys are talking about how NASA faked the moonshot, it was done in Hollywood, but then they say matter-of-factly, like it's a known thing, that the moon's a hologram. And one of the individuals, and I think she may be female, I'm not 100% positive, she said, well, this is the first I'm hearing of this, but they're talking very matter-of-factly, and there's a link. And I hit that link, and it took me to a very important page that I never would have otherwise found. It was to a gentleman named Katim Alexander, who I believe his nickname is probably Hattie Bov. I've been saying Hattie Bow, but I've been corrected. It's probably Hattie Bov. And this gentleman described verbatim some of the things I had come to know. He said it's not just near a full moon, it's always in the 3rd phase of the moon, which is kind of telling for those who use YouTube. But anyhow, 3rd phase of the moon, he said it's absolutely connected to equinoxes, and he goes into great lengths and actually expounds heavily on the importance of the vernal or spring equinox up to Easter, which is where we are now. So that is when I chose to announce that I believed that what we were looking up in the sky was not a rock in orbit. It's a facade, and though the word hologram has been used, I think that's a poor description. I think maybe just saying a facade is a better way to put it, that is covering something up. What that something is, I was never sure of, but this gentleman held secret government positions. He died in 2011, and as a matter of fact, his research was forced away from him sometime before his death, sent to Israel with an oil company involved, which is really when I started getting interesting, when I began to read these types of things. But what he said was that the amount of energy that's available for use in this place we live from the vernal equinox to Easter is unparalleled for the rest of the year. And, well, put it this way, anyone who wants to know about this can go do the research. I provide Hattie Bob links. It goes on and on and on. The point is there were 3 or 4 points where this man is talking about a lunar hologram or illusion, and what he is saying lines up perfectly with what I had come to believe. So maybe I'll shorten it down to that for now.
What type of energy is that?
The energy that's available?
Yeah.
So when we pass the vernal equinox, anyone can go outside and understand the amount of energy that's available pouring out of the earth just by looking at everything turn green again, bloom, make fruit. And apparently, and this is from the Russian research. I have no way to vet what I'm about to say. This comes to an apex at around Easter, whereas most of us would think, well, it probably comes to apex at the summer solstice when the sun is at the height of its power. But in his research, he goes into all this very technical talk about the energy being used in all these ways. But again, this is really outside. I take it all, I remember it, and hopefully we'll be able to vet it in some way in the future. But for now, it's just information that I'm aware of. But the energy we're talking about is just basically what we call springtime. You know, everything comes back to life, blooms, natural energy.
Life force energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. The force.
Yes. So is the lunar wave, is that like the image of the moon rebooting itself? Or refreshing?
Well, yeah, it's crazy. In his research, he kind of ties it to 3 genome types here on the planet, stating that basically there's 3 main genotypes, and he talks about what's supposed to happen. But what he said was the lunar wave, as I saw it, would occur in the 3rd phase of the moon without fail until 2012. But he also talks about these things being done with genome types of human beings that started in 2009 and would end in 2012. And again, that's a whole other topic. And again, it's all very fascinating, but I don't know how you get information like that unless you're, you know, holding the most secret of positions in some government somewhere, if it's even, you know, I just don't know what to do with that information, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of read through that paper. If I'm thinking of the same one, I'm pretty sure I am. He did talk about the genomes, the 44, the 42, and
yes.
Yeah, okay. So there was also mention in that paper of time and something along those lines in relation to the moon. And I'm just curious, the thing that popped into my head, and something's kind of pulled out of there, not directly, but seemed to be alluded to, is that the time differential between what we have here on the surface of the planet and at whatever altitude the moon is obviously it's going to be different. And I just thought about maybe a resyncing of the moon at certain periods of the year, like right before the spring equinox. You know, maybe they have to reset the computer.
Well, I think what you're doing, you know, just as you have explained that to me just now, is where all of us are at. And it kind of depends on where your level of understanding is, or what the things you have chosen to believe in based on the research you've personally done are. So I totally understand what you just said. For me, I'm still digging at it, and I think one of the things that is going to be very key in the Hattie Bob research is octaves. I think the octave work is going to be a big darn deal, and I have been aware of these kinds of ideas for, I mean, it was decades ago that I first was exposed to like the Kabbalion and the Emerald Tablets, where you learn about these ancient, you know, laws. I think there's 7 of them: correspondence, vibration, rhythm, some version of karma, you know, whatever you choose to call cause and effect. I think those octaves are going to be so key. And for people who have studied cymatics and music beyond just the actual use of music for entertainment or pleasure, that's what I'm really looking into right now. And he goes into great length talking about what the planet that we live on is tuned to, what human beings are tuned to, and he even claims that there's automated drones servicing this system that's being hidden by what we call the lunar, or what I call the lunar wave. And the claim he makes is that they're tuned differently, so they couldn't come here even if they wanted to. And again, you know, what do you do with information like that? It's staggering to think about, but I have no way to put a value on something like that at this point in time.
All right. Yeah. Well, vibration and frequency have definitely been something that I've delved quite deeply into, and I understand that beings that are existing within a different frequency can just be just a fuzz off of our frequency and be completely invisible to us and imperceivable unless you have develop certain skills within yourself and abilities within yourself to be able to sense beyond or raise your own vibration to a different level.
Right, and I can put this, for the average person listening that hasn't really looked into these kinds of things, it sounds outlandish when you first hear about it, but I can put a little perspective on this. If you look up the visible spectrum of light on your computer sometime, you will see that it is such a narrow little band that the human eye can pick up. And in my work, I'm working on being able to go into other spectrums, and what you see is even just getting a ways into IR, infrared, or UV, ultraviolet, it more than triples or quadruples that little tiny sliver we see with our eyes. So I think that's a good way to maybe think about it in your mind, what you just said, where something could be right here, but we just can't detect it.
Yeah, so do you have any ideas of, or any speculations of what the hologram could be hiding, or what it could be covering?
Well, the first thing that I should mention is I have done so many thousands of hours of research on what we have been told about the moon, and almost anything you look at is problematic. I mean, it's a much easier day to find things that are strange about our moon than it is to find things that are run-of-the-mill. And the further you get into this, you begin to understand that even the NASA explanations of how the moon got here, they don't have one. Yeah. There are basically 5 explanations, but here's the kicker. The 5th one was proposed in 2010, and so that proves the previous 4 are wrong, and the truth is that the last one that was proposed in 2010 is not accepted either because it is just as problematic. So what you begin to understand is everything we've been told about the moon is problematic, and when you look at center of gravity and even all the guys in NASA that are basically saying it's hollow, when you understand what I have come to understand, you say to yourself, we're looking at a facade that's covering something. What is it covering? The first problem you're going to deal with is, well, what's causing the tides?
Yeah.
We've been told the moon does that. I think it's a system of control, and I thought that long before I read the Russian research, but he goes into great detail saying that the facade we see on this side that faces us is 184 kilometers thick and thicker on the backside. He points out that the center of gravity is all off. I believe he's saying, and again, as I get better translations, I will know more. I believe he's saying it's covering a black cube kind of thing that is a system of control. And again, I understand what I think he is saying, but I have to be able to vet this in some way for it to be, usable and demonstratable to people. But that's where he's at, and I had come to understand that, wait a minute, if all these things are wrong about the moon, how are the tides working in the way that we've been told they are? And I just don't believe that any of what we have been told about the moon is correct. And I think anyone who's looked at it can start with the Apollo landings. Those are scientifically demonstratable falsehoods. That was a complete fabrication, put together in a Hollywood basement.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And we just did a show with Mark Sargent from the Flat Earth Clues, and it's I could see how the moon or the hologram of the moon or whatever it is, I can see how both of these are lining up, and I mean, we have jets in our hot tubs, we have jets in our tubs, what's to say there's not a big jets in the ocean that control our tides? I mean, if everything that we've been told so far has been false, then I mean, where do we start at now?
Well, I mean, I think you've hit it on the head. Where do you start at now? And the truth is, you don't start anywhere. You start over. Unfortunately, what I have found is the only way to move forward, and I did this a long, long time ago, is just to throw out everything you've been taught and start clean. And it is a very difficult thing to do. Almost impossible, because you constantly find yourself wanting to go back to your comfort zone, back to all the things that you came to believe over a lifetime. But if you stick with it and you hold to that commitment, at some point you will see the world with new eyes. And when you get to that point, you quickly begin to understand that everything you know is wrong. Everything should be questioned. You were talking about the flat Earth. While I have no intention of getting into that argument because it's just a big argument right now,
it's huge.
It's an undeniable fact, whether you want to listen to convex, concave, flat, they are all putting forth arguments that are not easily dismissible. And it's unfortunate that they don't all agree that they're saying what we've been told is wrong, let's work together. Right now it's just a big fight about shape, I guess, and I'm not really interested in getting in on that other than to say, look what's being questioned and look at what they're coming up with, that you can't just say, well, that's not right, because you can't say that. Some of the evidence they're putting forward is going to make you think.
Yeah, for me, it's, I've started over in my ways of thinking a few times so far, and I have no problem starting over. It's just so interesting and so fascinating. I think it's just a brand new opportunity to explore a whole new range of consciousness. If we thought the Earth was flat or round, whatever, but just the idea of that, breaks open doors and says, and makes everybody think, and with the moon ripple, I seen that and it just blew my mind. I'm like, man, another thing? Now I got another thing to stack on top of everything else, So it's great. This is like, I can't think of the words. This is like a living soap opera. We're just so caught in the drama, and it's not, and I'm not saying I want to be caught in the drama, but the whole fact of just, a new mind expanding experience, and it's just new growth now.
We seem to have crossed a bridge not too long ago and entered a time that's going to be about breaking boundaries and destroying old paradigms. And the truth is many people who are beginning to come out of their slumber and say, wait a minute, something's not right here, their stepping stone is going to be the news. A lot of them. They're going to, one day, for whatever reason, see the next event that the news is throwing out, and they're going to say there's something wrong about this. And then what's going to happen is they're going to come to realize that, yeah, there was something wrong. These things are staged and they're being handed off to the world as real. What happens for a long period of time is people who get there begin to look, well, Sandy Hook was fake. Who did it? Who was involved in it? And they, where did this happen? How many times has this happened? They keep digging further and further and further long after they've proven to themselves that it was a staged event and that that's completely demonstratable beyond an arguable point.
Yeah.
But that is a valuable thing to occur, and people need to point out these frauds, but the problem is that is a microscopic view, and at some point people need to step back about 10 miles back and take a macro view. And when that begins to happen for an individual, they're going to quickly find that there are no edges to this deception of the age we find ourselves in. Everything you can see is in that same pot of mud that you discovered one day because the news was telling you the 66th plane crashed in 1 week,
Yeah.
It's that proverbial you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah. Really.
It is. When we're so deeply immersed in our lives, and they've got us so damn distracted and busy with just making it day to day for the average person out here on the planet. They've got the nose to the grindstone, and they've got, bill collectors and taxes, and then for a few minutes of relaxation, they watch that mind-numbing, brain-programming sitcom in the evening for a couple of hours and kick back and have a beer. And then get up the next morning and do this drudgery slave job all over again. I see such potential within humanity and within the possibilities and potential we have here on this planet of creating a place here that we can all enjoy and we can all have a good time and we can help each other. But there's definitely some milestones that we have to get across before we can even consider the possibility of it becoming a reality. And one of them is seeing that what is being told to us and what is being shown to us on so many different levels is just flat out deception, and it's control, the architects of control, right? That control sphere or cube.
Well, you know, this is, I've said this a lot of times. Everything you just described about the average individual trying to raise a family, trying to make it to retirement, trying to get through another damn week of just grinding your body down to a nub at whatever job you may find yourself in. This is the system, another facet of the system, which is designed to make it very difficult for any of those individuals to catch on to what so many people are now beginning to catch on to. But I would point out, when you go to school, you are taught how to function within the system. That's what you're taught. There are people on this planet who are from the right family, have the right blood, maybe they're the type O, maybe it's copper-based, maybe they have been born to a royal family who have always been in charge forever, maybe they're just one of the families that have had money and power all the way through history. Those people are taught other things. They go to like that, what's the name of that Hogwarts-looking college in Europe there? They go to places like this, Skull and Bones, the elite portions of Harvard. These people are taught more than just how to function within the system, like the majority of us are. They are taught something about the system. So while the average person basically ends up a bit like a farm animal, you're going to live your life, you're going to raise a family, you're going to work, you're going to die, and it's going to be difficult a lot of the way through for you. Then there's other people who control things and pull the strings. Money will never be a problem for these people. They've had the best educations. You know, from the time they were 16, they were driving a Ferrari if they wanted to. There are numbers of people, and, you know, probably not massive numbers, but there are numbers of people who have been told something about how the system works, not just how to get along in the system. And that's a true thing.
Yeah, well, it just kind of makes me think what you were talking about earlier with the types of, or with during the equinoxes and the energy being higher. You know, is this a way? I mean, is this whole system designed just to feed off of our energy? I mean, not only, you know, I mean, just, you know, we're so stuck in this grind, and, you know, a lot of us, you know, are, you know, constantly in some sort of depression, you know, or on some sort of medication for depression or for anxiety or something else. You know, so I mean, it just seems to me that this whole thing has been designed to keep us in this lower frequency. You know, so like something just keeps feeding off of us, taking our energy.
Well, I mean, that was a lot of the subtext of the movie The Matrix, is everyone's a copper top.
Right.
And while that's allegory, and there is clearly an underlying story there for people who understand movies are for more than entertainment, I would mention, you know, it's not hard to imagine that something is feeding off our energy, but there are some things we know for a fact. When you see, you know, if you sit down on any given day and you grab a piece of paper and you put positive and negative on either side of that paper and you watch your news, what you will find is that the negative side is so heavily outweighing the positive side. And what happens to people is they forget how to critically think. Like, I went out today, I met a new guy at the bank who was a nice man. I met a guy at a camera store. I met a new guy at the scope shop that I'd never met before. I did see a fender bender, so that was one negative thing. But 90-something% of my day today was meeting good people and having a good time. In other words, what the news is showing you does not reflect the reality of the average person. And so what you see, well, let me put it this way. When people are put in a state of fear and anguish and duress, they are very malleable to suggestion and other things that are a bit more dark than suggestion. So the idea of feeding, you know, on someone's energy, I think that's a plausible idea, but it's a known fact that if you put people in emotional, heightened states and states of duress, you can do a lot of things to those people that they will voluntarily do themselves simply through suggestion or other more nefarious means. So, yeah.
Are you a meditator?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is, and something that I notice in my own personal life is that when I started actually really asking questions, what my first real question was, what the hell is going on here? I was kneeling in the center of my burned out house down in Palm Springs, and my whole life I got that proverbial 2x4 upside the head to wake me up. So once I started asking those questions, all the negative events that continued to happen in my life over and over and over again, getting pulled over, blah, 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 all these things, the fear that I had, all that stuff has gradually just melted away out of my way. And it seems like it's like my path has been cleared, and I draw to me good people. Good people cross my path now. Instead of, I used to, like attracts like. They say opposites attract, but we attract like. We draw to us like-minded people. And I have just seen that since I started asking serious questions and started really getting in touch with who Tom is, then my life has changed. My outlook has completely changed. I did get rid of my TV, but so I don't have that constant barrage of programming. But I've just noted that for myself in a very remarkable way. I noticed it. I had one of those epiphany days. I don't know how long ago it was now, 15, 20 years ago now, that I went, wow, I'm not getting all the crap I used to get. And that was just from being a serious, true seeker of truth. The bottom line, and best way to put it, I guess.
Well, I think there's a lot to what you say. If you're vibrating, to put it in kind of an allegorical way, like a baritone, you're not going to attract someone hitting the high C. That's all there is to it. And many people fail to understand that words have meanings. That's all there is to it. Words mean things. And even though at age 3 we are taught to spell, Hogwarts reference, we use so many words in a day that we really don't understand how many meanings these words have. There are people around us who do. There are people around us who say things on TV and movies all the time, and while you and I may hear one thing, there is a whole other level of communication going on there. To take that a step further, most of us, when we think, how are we thinking? Well, sure, we think with shapes and colors and things, but words come into that. So how you think has a big effect on how your day, your month, your year, your life goes. If you're constantly overwhelmed and fearful because ISIS is going to attack America, because you're pretty sure that you got to fly on a plane and there's a 90% chance it's going to crash. If you live your life in a state of anxiety, what you're going to attract to your life is negative things. And so I think what I heard you say is when you finally clear out and realize that there really is no reason to be afraid of anything, things change a lot.
That's it in a nutshell right there. Yeah. So here's a question for you about all the different anomalies that you've been capturing on video. Have you noticed any numerological or other synchronistic connections within, dates, times, or any other quantifiable type of event that you can tie into what you've been capturing?
Well, I think my answer is going to be a bit of a cop-out because I'm not much of a math guy, but my wife, who is referred to as Crrow, she's very good at math, and there's clearly a numerical base to all this. It's there's a reason why we hear 9/11 all the time, and why those two numbers are encoded to clocks in so many thousands of movies. There's a whole gematria and a numerology going on by the ruling class, and I have noticed to some degree that there's definitely a correlation in the work I've done. But the truth is, I'm not really going to expound on that because I'm just not very good at math, and if I don't have my wife doing it with me, I don't want to embarrass myself.
Yeah, understood. Let's see, where to go. Oh, here's another one. That's something, you know, when I look up at the moon, I see this thing. It's just a pockmarked, just totally blasted. It looks like it got pepper sprayed with a shotgun, you know, with bird shot or something. I mean, it's got more damn holes and craters, and but I can't think of a single shot of an impact.
There you go. You just nailed it. So I've been sky watching for thousands, literally many thousands of hours in my lifetime, and over the past, you know, since 2012, pretty much nonstop. And I have seen lots of fireballs that we are told are meteorites. Whether or not that's accurate, I don't know. I'm questioning whether that's accurate. Point is, I see them. We're told those are rocks coming out of space. In all my many thousands of hours, all videoed, the vast majority of it, 98% of it videoed, nothing has ever hit the face of the moon. And to top it off, we're told there's no atmosphere. So there's a problem there. Well, I said that on my channel not too long ago, and someone showed up with that one 4K. They're all, oh, this is from a 4K camera. It's a black and white, blurry-ass picture of the moon, and for about 4 to 8 frames, there's a little white flare dot that comes up, and we're told that was an impact. And my response to that was, at what point will NASA be required to approach the quality of video I produce with regard to the moon? You know, at what point do they have to step up to the plate and show us nice, crisp HD video? And, you know, it doesn't happen. And that one video is the only thing that we get to see, and it's fake, fake, fakety fake. So what you're pointing out is what I said early on in this conversation. It is very easy to find weird things about the moon, not so easy to find run-of-the-mill things.
Right. Remember a couple of years ago they fired some shit at and I'm just pulling off a straight memory here. I didn't look it up today in preparation for this question. But they shot something at a crater down on the southern end of the moon to try to blow up, if I remember right, blow up something inside.
Find water.
Try to find water. Did you happen to be trying to observe that event?
So, funny you should ask. Every time I have been told that the Chinese are going, that we're in orbit, that something is mapping, that they're crashing something into the moon, around the moon, going to the moon, the moony moon, I've been there with my scope. You know what I've seen? I've seen 2 things, diddly and squat.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you know, that one there was so much hype around that too, and I was like, I was watching their live feed during that, and I didn't see shit in their live feed, and I was like, what the hell?
It's magic. They're putting an image in everyone's mind. You know, it's what Star Trek did back in the 60s or the early 70s, whenever it was. It's, you know, and I've said this too many times lately in interviews, but I'll say it again because it works. It's true. The Red Hot Chili Peppers song, you know, it says, space may be the final frontier, but it was made in a Hollywood basement. You know, truer words were never spoken. It is a form of magic. People that you will never meet have formed an image of your reality and implanted it in your mind, and the majority of us have accepted that created image is in fact what's going on up above our heads. But I'm here to tell you, NASA's mission, I'll tell you exactly what it is. NASA's mission is to ensure, and not just NASA, every space agency, every country that has a space agency with a vector in their space agency logo, and they all got them, they have one mission, to ensure that you have next to no idea what's going on 25 miles above your head.
Yeah. So there's another thing that I noted on the moon, and I don't know if this is just a matter of perspective, and I haven't really sat down and really done the mind exercise on this. But there's I don't know what the degree, how much of a degree of a rotation there is, but there's a rotation of the moon also to back and forth, right and left.
Yes.
Would you explain that to me a little bit if you could?
Sure.
What you know about it?
Yeah, so the truth is if you spend 6 hours staring at the moon on any given night, you will see the moon rotate roughly 90 degrees over 6 hours. Happens every night. But as you mentioned, it tips a little forward and tilts a little back. That's called libration, L-I-B, not liberation, libration. If you go online and you look up an animation for libration, generally they show you the whole, the whole ball of wax there. They show you the 90-degree twist over 6 hours, and they show you the tilt forward and tilt back. I think, and I'm pulling this off the top of my head, I think we see roughly 54 or 55% because of the little tilt that happens. And in all the little astronomy magazines, they make it's a big deal. Oh, you're going to see an extra % of moon if you watch here, here, and here. You'll see this crater named this, So, yeah, it's a thing, and a lot of people get confused. If you go on YouTube, you'll see a lot of people saying, look, the moon's fake. It's oriented wrong. And the truth is they just don't really understand how that rotation occurs.
Now, that is a point of perspective, then, from your point of perspective.
Well, to be honest, I have come to say from my perspective on nearly everything I say, and that's a key thing you just mentioned, yes, absolutely from our perspective. And the reason I say that is because if you're, somewhere watching a play, looking at the stage, everything that you're going to see is from your perspective.
Right. Right. Oh, wow. So I've actually videotaped a couple of lights on the moon myself. This was just shortly, probably 2010 or 2009, somewhere in there. I caught a flashing light on the right above the southern pole, and that one was pretty interesting. But another one that I caught, I think it was an Aristarchus. It was in the dark side. It was about a half moon, and I just, for whatever reason, I'd panned off of the bright side of the moon and noticed that, wow, there's a light there. And I don't know if I was seeing a bright star behind it, or if there was actually, at the time, and right now I just have a big question mark. I don't know what I saw. But I guess I'm asking, what kind of lights, fixed lights, have you been able to see?
Well, in terms of fixed lights, the closest I can come to that is during eclipses, what you will see, and you brought up Aristarchus. I used that as an example in a video because if you go online and look up pictures of Aristarchus, you'll find no two images that look the same. I mean, it's blatant.
Right.
But what I said was, in certain views when we're watching the moon, Aristarchus does look like a crater to my eye, to what moon maps say. And by the way, no two moon maps are the same, almost, verbatim. But I said to myself, as the lunar eclipse happens, as that shadow covers Aristarchus, that shadow should make it look like a crater at some point, right? Because when I'm watching the phases of the moon, and on those night or two when it does look like a crater, it's a shadow doing it. So we filmed it, and what we found was that it was bright white, and when it was well into the darkened portion, and I turned up my ISO, it looked like a fixed light. At no point did it look like a crater. And, anyone who's truly interested, that's a good little thought experiment to do. Go online, even if you use NASA's images, and look at all the imagery you can get your hands on for Aristarchus crater. It's a controversial one. People say all kinds of crazy things. It's a power plant. It's an alien base. It's all these things. Point is, you won't find two images that look the same.
Have you seen, I guess, who was it, Mike Barra, I think it was, the moon rising? I'm sure you have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of that work?
Yeah. When I'm looking for reality, I stay as far away from TVs, movies, fame, and fortune as I can get, because what I find is a lot of people, like I think Mr. Ike is like this, they walk right up to the truth, and then they shovel a bunch of manure all over it. And so what happens is somewhere deep in people, they sense that, hey, man, this seems like it's getting towards something accurate, when in fact it's really not. It's something else, and so, yeah, I'm not impressed.
Back to NASA, all the footage being fake and all that, What about our shuttles? We send our shuttles out. They just go to nowhere. I mean, we got to have someone see them. Does that mean they're just floating around up there until they supposedly come back? And space debris and satellites. I mean, how do you? Where are our satellites? Help me out there.
Okay, I can do that. It is my view that nobody leaves this planet. Nobody goes above low Earth orbit. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody. And this also comes back to the whole octaves things we were talking about earlier, where, you know, if you're kind of tuned for the environment you're in, you can't leave that environment. You don't need a prison wall to do that. If you leave that place that you're tuned to, it doesn't work anymore. You end. But here's a crazy thing, you know. I'm guessing that everyone sitting in the room over there is well aware that movies are for more than entertainment, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so in the opening lines of the movie Gravity that they made such a big deal about at, you know, the Oscars and all their little black magic things they do, the opening lines, they tell you the absolute truth in the very opening lines. It is impossible to live in space, or something to that effect, in the very opening lines of Gravity. That's what they tell you. And what you will find is, well, here's a good way to put it. You guys have seen my footage. Not too long ago, I filmed something that I assume is in low Earth orbit that looks like it's got 3 thrusters on it, big thrusters, proving that my little no-budget 12-inch scope can see that far. If I was ever given the opportunity to watch a rocket launch, I would put my equipment on it and I would film it all the way into orbit, and then I would film it in orbit. Why don't we see that? Why has no one ever done that? Or how about when something's coming re-entry and there's this big burn and the thing's glowing like a coal? How come no one's ever filmed that? Well, there's a reason. You know, these are important things. If they really happened, there would be footage of them. It's kind of akin to the Apollo footage. You know, we've been told now that they accidentally lost the reels, the original reels,
right,
to the greatest thing man has ever done. It does not take a genius to understand what's going on here. If that was the greatest thing man had ever done, there would have been backups. It wouldn't have got lost. Point is, I'm Crrow 777, and I'm talking to NASA right now. NASA, if you go to space, allow me access with my equipment to film one of your launches so that I can film it all the way into space and into orbit. And I don't think they're going to take me up on it, because I don't think they go any higher than low Earth orbit. And I'll go a step further. There are some images that were shot of rocket launches from airplanes. As a matter of fact, I think you can search those. I don't think it's too hard to find. And you see this heavy, heavy arc right away as the rockets, maybe, I don't know, so many thousands of feet, it begins to arc. It looks to me like what happened on some of these is they just shot them out over the ocean. I mean, that's what it looks like is going on to me. I'm not there, so I can only speculate. But I can tell you, go look at my footage, and you can understand. I can film things in low Earth orbit, and I have no budget. So there's the challenge. NASA, you want to prove you're leaving this planet? Let Crrow 777 get his equipment to film a rocket launch.
There you go.
Love to see that.
Have you filmed the ISS?
No, I just, you know, the Meade scopes that I mentioned, you know, I've still got the first one I bought. It's an Army tank. Everything was made in America. It's the best. Just such a tough scope. So I bought this LX600 12-inch that did everything, including make espresso. And one of the functions on this thing was get ready to track the ISS, and you get a 10-second countdown when it's coming, and then it'll go track it. Thing is, that thing's hauling butt. Like, if you've ever seen the footage that they claim is the ISS going across the face of the moon, happens about a second, right?
Right.
It's I don't know how they're doing it. I can't tell you what we're actually seeing go by, but there are no human beings in that thing. If you take it apart, how can I explain this? Well, here's a good way to go at it. Can you imagine a little tiny place like that, what it would smell like in there? With
Yeah.
all the dead skin, and, you know, and you see these pictures of these people just happy as clams, looking great, haven't had a shower in, you know, however many months they've been up. There's a guy, I guess, who's going up for a year or something. They just announced. I mean, it defies logic. If you can toss out the imagery and your pride in astronauts and look at these things critically, you will very quickly understand that it's all a shell game. And as a matter of fact, not too long ago, the Chinese were caught passing off pool footage as astronauts in space because bubbles came out of the visor. Bubbles came out of a couple places.
Didn't somebody have a leak here not too long ago, too? Like a gallon of water in the helmet or something like that?
Oh, I heard something about that. It's just at this point, I don't even get the joy out of looking anymore. I mean, it used to be, yeah, see, I told you, but that was so long ago, it's like, yeah, I know. And the other thing is when you see pictures of the pool where they've got the replica ISS, they never show you this angle, but I have seen some images where you can detect it. There's a huge green screen that goes down into the pool. A lot of the footage we're handed is almost certainly shot there. And even if it wasn't, I mean, go look at the movie Gravity I just referenced. You can't tell that's not shot in space. It's that good.
Right, right. And then that brings up the question, how long have they had this technology? And we can go back into the Kubrick work, the 2001 Space Odyssey. And I love your references that you've made and the points that you brought out about like Room 237 and the stuff that Jay Widener's doing. That stuff is just absolutely a must-see if anybody really if they're on the fence and not really sure whether or not the moon stuff is, is it real, is it not real? Go check out that stuff at least.
Well, you got to hear this because I had not yet seen 237. Actually, I still haven't seen it in its entirety.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen half of it so far. I'm always so busy. I always get interrupted, or I'm just always behind. I'm a one-man show. But anyhow, it was on a high priority list to go watch when I did the clip that I did that talked about Kubrick's possible involvement, queuing up the technology in 2001 and referencing movies like Capricorn 1, even the James Bond Diamonds Are Forever, where they're showing you sound stages where they're filming fake lunar stuff. But as I was doing the research for that, I noticed that Danny in The Shining, and just to preface all this, Kubrick redid Stephen King's The Shining, and it doesn't really match the book. As a matter of fact, almost everywhere the movie departs from the book, it's pretty clear Kubrick's got a subtext going, and I think a lot of it's about the Apollo missions, and I think it looks to me like he regretted later having taken part in it. But there's one part of the movie where little kid Danny's on the floor, and I realized 2 days earlier when I was doing research, I saw the launch pad that Apollo came off, and the carpet that Danny was sitting on is the same pattern as an aerial shot of the launch pad that the Apollo missions came from, and I thought, that's strange. But when Danny stands up in the movie, he's wearing an Apollo 11 sweater. But really got me is when I started seeing these things, I said, okay, I'll dig into the movie and I'll look for anything that I could possibly associate with Apollo. And sure enough, the first thing I found were these Tang canisters were placed in the Shining's kitchen thing. But here's the thing about that. I had read about Kubrick that, like, supposedly he had like a 200-something IQ and that he drove people crazy by setting his own props endlessly, carefully, just like OCD guy or something. But I noticed those Tang cans, just something about their placement hit me funny. And so I was alive in the 60s, and I went back looking for Tang references, and I stumbled across the 1960s Tang commercial where there's like a space, they're on the moon, and the shadow eclipses the Tang canister, and that's when I realized that it was, he set up those Tang canisters to look the same in the movie. And the funny thing is it was a while before I saw the first half, or maybe 2/3 of, what is it, 230, room 230?
237.
237, and he had found both of those things, and I had found them independent of him. So it's clear that there's, here we are on the 100th monkey. There it is. All this stuff is kind of bubbling up independent of each other at the same time. But I think there's little doubt that there's a whole Apollo subtext in The Shining.
Yeah. And God, I can't say this enough for you guys, that if you're on the fence out there about all this stuff and about whether or not NASA is giving us the real story, just go on YouTube and punch in a couple of things about, just look at ISS fakery or anything along those lines. You will find just a tremendous amount of really good research and evidence that will make you think at the very least. And
it's not deniable at this point. I mean, let's be honest. The time for giving them a fair shake is so far past. I mean, let's really be honest. What happens is, as human beings, we get nervous about saying what we think is true because we understand that a lot of people aren't going to agree with us. Well, I woke up a few years ago, and I kind of noticed I felt like I was living in boiling water, and I think the time for giving them the benefit of the doubt is just gone. Call it what it is. There is a mountain of undismissible evidence that demonstrates NASA has lied from the beginning, and that at this point you can't trust anything that comes from them. Anything.
Agreed. Yeah, never a straight answer. Right.
Never was a straight answer from the outset. It's sad but true.
I think the whole creation of, this ties into a lot of the other theories about the shape of the planet. Convex, whatever, flat, who cares? I mean, the NASA came into being right after we started trying to blow up the atmosphere, I guess. I mean, I just found that tie-in just quite remarkable for myself. Why in the hell would we aim our nukes straight up at the sky and blow them up in our atmosphere? I mean, who in their sane mind, if we were living on the planet that they were telling us we were living on, would even consider high explosives in our atmosphere? I mean, hell, we don't know. Maybe we set the atmosphere on fire and burn the whole planet down.
You're pointing out a thing that people should also question. Go online and look for every nuclear blast you can see, particularly those old propaganda reels. There's ones where they show three houses. The good American that's got his white picket fence and his house is neat. The sloppy guy in the middle whose house is going to burn down the quickest when they pop the nuke off. And then, the third house, the control house. But go back and look at just how many blasts do you think were filmed that you can get your hands on? And of those, look at them critically. Look at when it gets too bright that there's easily a film cut. Look for camera pans, cuts. Look for all the typical things that demonstrate fakery to you. And you will understand that there was a period in American history where much of what we came to understand, like World War II, if it wasn't on a newsreel, people didn't know about it. That was where they were getting, besides the paper, a lot of information. Point is, in this day and age, we know exactly what video and film can do, and we know exactly what a newsreel is in the modern age. And I would just say, question those things. Go look at them, and you're going to get surprised.
That brings up a lot of questions about UFOs in my mind right now. All that footage that we see of crop circles and UFO landings, and that's all in a Hollywood basement too then, right?
Of course. What we see is a concerted effort to implant an image of what aliens will become in our modern age now, beginning, something like the 50s, the day the Earth stood still. Where do we get the imagery for grays? How many times has that just been totally reinforced and expanded on? Even Spielberg's work from the 70s there, Close Encounters. What we see is a constant Hollywood thread where much of the things we think we have a handle on, why do we wear blue jeans in this country if you really want to get down to nuts and bolts? At one point that was a Hollywood fabrication too. Just kind of culture and the things that we get, so much of it has come from film and entertainment in the Western world. And, I've made videos showing people standing in front of TVs looking at super secret aliens and thinking to themselves, oh, we're getting good inside information. It's a bit hard to accept that people still think that when you turn on the TV, you're getting anything but news or information. Everything but those two things is what you're getting.
Yeah, well, it kind of makes you think if if there's some sort of technology out there that is that ancient that can project a picture of the moon for so many thousands and thousands and thousands of years, you know, that's so much more advanced than us than I mean, what's to say what they couldn't do? So if the lights we see in the sky, or if the entities that talk to us in our minds, you know, if you can create a picture of the moon that detailed and that massive in size, and you've been doing it for thousands of years, you know, what else can you do? What else are you capable of doing? And if you're going to deceive, you know, a whole planet worth of people, you know, just into thinking that there is a moon, you know, if you're gonna deceive at a small point or a massive point, it's still deception. And how deep does that deception run?
Well, let me run this by you. So, in the Russian research, Hadibov claims, and again, I'm talking about things that it's not possible for an average human being to know. I'm not in a secret society. I never held a secret government position, but I will tell you what this man, who apparently did, said. He claimed the moon that we see in the sky came to be at about 18,000 BC, which is interesting on a few levels because I think a lot of people might try to put the Great Flood, whatever that was about, in this time area, roughly. But he was talking about the Great Pyramid. He calls it the Cheops Pyramid, but that is in fact the Great Pyramid. There's a hole in the pyramid that we are told is ceremonial, and it should point to the North Star, but it's about a degree off. We've heard all kinds of reasons from the Egyptologists. Oh, it's ceremonial, that's why it missed. Or the precession of the equinoxes, that's why it missed. Well, what this man did was said, wait a minute, that hole was precision. This whole thing is precision. Why would that not be pointing at the North Star? And by the way, he doesn't buy into the precession. Neither do I. But he did a calculation. He removed the moon out of the picture with Earth, and the correction in how Earth would sit would be exact amount to let that opening line up on that star again. So what he deduced from that was that the pyramids were built before there was a moon in our sky. And for those of you who have followed me, you may have seen the research where I started to question. If there was a time before the moon, then we should be able to find some trace of that. And what I found was astonishing. Plutarch, Aristotle, Censorinus, there's a whole line of them that were teaching their students and talking about a time before the moon. Aristotle was talking about a people called the Proselines, I think is the word, and their name translates to a time before the moon. And they were all talking about Arcadians who lived here before there was a moon in the sky. And that's further interesting for anyone who's been into Renaissance art, because Arcadia and Arcadians are endlessly encoded in Renaissance art as if it was some kind of a golden time. That's the impression I get anyhow. But to take it further, the Caldera Indians of Colombia talk about the early history of their people in a time before there was a moon in the sky. Even the Mayans, who, I mean, most people are aware they've got this amazing little round, circular, unique observatory that was expressly for tracking Venus, but in their history, they talk about a time when Venus ruled the sky and there was no moon. And so what we're talking about here is, you know, if Hadibov was even right at any level, I said I should be able to find some trace somewhere. Well, I didn't find just some trace. I found an endless line of references, and they're the kinds of things that are easily not included in the typical textbook, if you follow me.
Yeah, well, the images that just popped into my mind while you were speaking was the thoughts of planet Nibiru, and you know, beings that came here, you know, and you know, I'm not saying that there was a planet or there wasn't a planet, but one of the things that I was thinking about was that if you're an ancient civilization, right, and you have no terminology, you know, your language isn't that developed yet. If you see a large object in the sky that just appears, you know, whether it's a ship or it's a moon or whether it's whatever, you know, you might just refer to it, and you know, thousands of years later, you would just refer to it as a planet. So, you know, I just kind of, you know, I was just just now tying in my head somehow that, what if, everybody's talking about Planet X and this and that and the other, but what if that's already here, and what if that's been here and that never left? It just went from being what they saw it to being, what we now think of as the moon, or a projection of the moon.
To this day, when I sit down and I look at the 2012 footage, every time, even if only a couple days have gone by and I look at it, it pulls me back to the night when I had the epiphany. The night that I shot that, and I'm a technical guy, I've got a degree in internet technology. I've been digital since the 90s, since before the internet was really even a thing yet. When I saw it happen that night, I reached over after the waves had passed to delete the clip. Had I done that, it would have been gone, but for some reason I didn't. For like 3 weeks to a month or something, I kept going back and looking. It was gnawing on me. But in my mind, I was thinking, oh, the camera failed. But something was bothering me. Well, after all this time went by, one day I threw it in the trash, and I went to bed. And that is the night I had the epiphany. And I jumped out of bed, and I ran out, and I restored the clip, and I realized all at once, of course, the camera pan proved that it was a filmed event, but more than that, that is not how digital technology fails. It just isn't. It's an organic wave, and that, it shook me to the core. And to this day, every time I go look at that footage, I get kind of a mild echo of the feeling I had when I realized what it meant. There's just no getting around it in my mind. What we've been told about the place we live is just not accurate.
Right. Now, hey, let's kind of go off into another area here. It all ties in a way, I believe. Well, I'm pretty sure it all ties in. And I'm going into chemtrails now. And when I've really first started becoming aware of chemtrails, that's when everybody was talking about trying to figure out why they were doing it, and that the Project Bluebeam stuff kept coming up, where they were spraying this shit in the atmosphere so that it's more conducive to holograms, to holographic projections, to that sort of manipulation to fake or stage their fake alien invasion. I guess what I want to ask you is, what do you feel the purpose behind the chemtrails are?
Here's the thing that I think is critical about chemtrails. There are so many wild speculations that it really harms the ability for those who haven't quite caught on to catch on. I would further point out, whenever the ruling class of this planet does something, it almost always has many facets, many functions, almost to the point where some of the things we see are so ingenious it's hard to believe that a human being came up with it, because it's doing so many different things. At the core, I think it is easily demonstrable that weather manipulation is right up there, even being able to produce Air Force documents that are titled Owning the Weather by 2025. I did an article on that not too long ago. So at the very apex, it's probably best to go at it in that way, even though I'm certain there are many other things that chemtrails are doing, particularly when you consider that this is going on nearly globally. There are very few places that I've heard from on my channel, and I get reports from all over the world, where they're not aware of chemtrails, and one of the places that always sticks out is in the Himalaya, northern India. Apparently they have not seen chemtrails. I've had a few people tell me this. At any rate, when you consider what they're doing, it's everywhere. Every major city is reporting, filming, and so when you think about that, that should put perspective in your mind. This is not just a little dismissible thing. This is a global effort, whatever it is. We know for a fact China has a weather modification bureau. We know for a fact that it was openly touted during the Olympics. We know for a fact that they used it and caused some disastrous blizzard. I think it was reported in 2009 that the modification bureau had screwed up. Point is, when you start to think about HAARP and other things, and here's another thing. I was a radio operator in the military, and one of the things we would do is bounce radio waves off the ionosphere to make, to go across a continent, or, bounce it off water in the ionosphere to make a further contact. When you see chemtrails, sometimes you'll notice like a frequency pattern. It almost looks like beach sand, but what you'll notice is it's localized. It'll be one patch where you just see this weird frequency pattern. So another thing that I think is quite possible is they're using it as a ceiling or a deck to bounce ultra-low frequency or ELF, VLF or ELF frequencies off, and there's a whole litany of pretty bad things that can do to people and otherwise. But those are the two things that I think are probably the easiest to demonstrate in some meaningful way. But it's clear that lab reports demonstrate heavy metals, 3 of them, aluminum, boron, and
strontium.
Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty clear to everyone that in volume, these things are not good for living things. So, there's that too. But to go out and say that they're trying to do a global genocide will always bring up the argument that the people that are doing it must have kids, right? So that doesn't make sense.
Right.
Which is a good point, but it doesn't matter. I've spent, again, thousands of hours filming these things. It is, in fact, going on to the point where, like today in Southern California, as I drove up north to go to the scope shop, they were spraying, but the way they were spraying, I knew that I would not be filming tonight. I predicted that we would get a milky white cover, which is what you see right now. So it's a real thing. And weather modification and using it as a ceiling or a deck to bounce frequencies, I think those are 2 good, strong possibilities.
Yeah. Now, I also think, this is something that I know. I know we have help out there in some form or fashion. I mean, just the own guidance that I have gotten in my own personal life has proven to me that there are energies, forces, beings, something out there, in there, wherever, I don't know if you can really say it's a location, but there's something there that is helping us. I mean, that there's a part here, just looking at this wave of truth that is coming through the planet right now, and thanks much to the internet and the connectivity of humanity now. I mean, we are actually starting to put pieces together. And I did note in some of the chemtrail videos that you shot that you caught some orbs in those. That one that there's one shot that you have there, and it looks like the orb is shooting something at the chemtrails.
Yeah. Well, that's a crazy piece of footage, one of my most popular. Here's the crazy thing about that. That was shot in March. March is a big deal. The vernal equinox is a big deal. I know what you're getting at is, where do I think they came from? What do I think they are? I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is sometimes in the back of my mind, I kind of sense that they're not on the same mission, if that makes any sense. They don't seem to be coming out of the planes. A lot of times we seem to get the impression that they're coming from somewhere else towards the chemtrails. That particular day we saw them go straight up till we couldn't see them anymore. People have suggested that maybe they're plasma balls, because if HARP is used, maybe plasma could come up. Problem with that is, in the footage you just mentioned, you see the thing change speed, change direction, and then fire 2 little, almost like little plasma-y looking beams or balls or something into the chemtrail. And the cloud in the chemtrail that it hits glows a little bit when it hits it. We saw many this day. So that was March, a long time ago. We haven't seen orbs like that since. We've had glimpses of them, but at the end of the day, I can't tell you what that's about. I can tell you definitively that I have never filmed an orb, that type of orb, when chemtrails have not been present, ever. And that is many thousands of hours of filming. And we have purposely tried to catch things when chemtrails aren't around. For some reason, when chemtrails are around, they're around.
That's interesting. So, and again, looking at some of the video that you have on of the moon, you've got some really interesting objects that I mean, you've got tons and tons of different objects that are flying across the face of the moon, and I think you call them shadowcraft. I'm just wondering if they're the same thing, just from from up there.
I don't think so. And so I described to you how I kind of began filming with that boomerang craft, and I did film one of those. And then there's a whole litany of these black round things, many of which look like they almost have like a magnetic halo.
Right.
And then there's the shadow ships, which I kind of predicted this year. I said that we needed to pay close attention to the moon and that activity would pick up and higher possibility for the lunar wave, and we're seeing that. This is actually happened. 3 or 4 nights ago, the shadow ships began to increase. We'd been filming, not catching much of anything transiting the moon. The other night, I caught between 30 and 40 of them. This level has been attained each night we've been able to shoot. It happens later at night, 9, 10, slower as it gets dark. But Hattie Bob talks about shadow ships, and apparently the idea of shadow ships in the Russian-speaking world is much more recognized thing. The trippy thing about those is they're invisible. If it was not for a fully lit, bright moon, you would never be able to detect them. And for the longest time, we didn't show them because we knew it would be hard to demonstrate that they weren't birds. We knew they weren't, but, that's a whole other thing to demonstrate this to people who don't use telescopes. My wife shot one the other night that changes direction, which is a big deal, and I've got that one posted. It's one of my last clips up, and you can see it's very well-defined, round, donut-looking thing, see-through. Now, these black objects I just mentioned, the reason they're also important is because I have shot, and one time from 2 states with another individual, shot an identifiable satellite. And it looks kind of like you'd expect it to look, like it's got a solar wing or 2 on it. They're very quick, crossing the moon in a second or less. All the satellites that I've shot and be able to ID have this kind of look. These other things we've been talking about, they don't look like anything we've ever been shown. And so I think it's important to get them on the record.
Yeah. It's another big question that will be answered one of these days, I'm guessing. I hope.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Well, tell me about skyfish. I think you call them skyfish?
I almost regret, no, not almost. Excuse me, I definitely regret having done that because there's a whole thing of, filming skyfish, which is basically anything with a ripply edge is just a flying insect or a bird. That's all those skyfish are. I called these things skyfish. The only time we saw them was on the day we shot the shooting orb we just described, and they were almost like the shape of a pollywog. They had like this flagella tail, and they were zipping all around. I've never seen them in my life, and I've never seen them since. We saw them on that day. And the other unique thing about that day was we had this cottony crap falling out of the chemtrails, but there wasn't much wind up high. There was a breeze down where we were, so we couldn't get any of it. It was laterally blowing away from us. But I filmed it coming right out of the chemtrails, so unfortunately I called them skyfish when I should have said these weird white things.
Right.
But that's the story on those.
There's years ago I saw a video of guys doing some cave jumping, skydiving into some cave down in South America, I think it was.
Yep.
And these interesting creatures were flying in around them, and they were moving so damn fast that you really couldn't see them all you saw with the naked eye was just a flash, and they'd be gone. Now, the ones that you caught, were they slow enough to see with the visible eye, with the naked eye?
Yeah, if you go back and look there's a couple versions of that footage, and you can absolutely see they're not moving that quickly, and they're very bright white. In a couple shots, you can kind of see the stringy tail. But again, it was only on that day, and I would make a very clear point here. What people call skyfish and rods and skyfish.
That's what they call them, yeah.
Yeah, you got to be, take that with a grain of salt, because I have filmed enough to know. As a matter of fact, when I see rods in my video now, I just delete it. It's a bug. And if they have any ripple on the edge, there's no doubt that's a wing flap. And even though, people want to make them into something else, I film all the time looking for interesting things. If I see what is called a skyfish or a rod, I just delete the video. Those are living things flying through the air, And if they're close enough to the camera, they look like they're breaking the speed of sound.
Yeah, true. So how do you feel about things, the possibility of some spacefaring creatures, something that can actually exist within, without oxygen in the atmosphere?
You mean outside of us?
Yeah, outside of us, so lower Earth orbit or above.
I think what we're going to find is that what we currently call space does not even resemble what we have come to think it is. I think that's probably the case. Having said that, I would be surprised if we are the only living things in this little bubble that we live in. That would be surprising to me, just simply because if you're out somewhere, in your experience, if you see a bunny, guess what? You're pretty sure there's other bunnies, right?
Right.
If you see a bunny and a snake, you're pretty sure that there's more than one species. Then if you throw a butterfly into the mix, you're pretty sure there's multiple species. So I would be surprised to understand that, the life here is all there is. But again, I can't get away from it. We have been lied to, provably lied to by our space agencies to a degree that leads me to believe that we're going to find out space is nothing like we have been told it is, and I will not be surprised when it comes out at some point in the not-too-distant future that we cannot leave here currently. Nobody, not even the richest, not even the most powerful. Nobody leaves this place.
Yeah, so saying the moon is a hologram, so what do you think about the stars in the sky that we see and the sun? Could those be different versions of the same program?
Well, I think the minute that you begin to understand what the moon quite possibly is, then everything comes into question. I mean, it's the same thing as Sandy Hook, right? As soon as you understand Sandy Hook was a put-up, everything else you've been put in the news, now you have to look at that differently, don't you? And pretty quickly you come to understand that the correct course of action is to say, I don't believe that. Now you have to prove it to me. But if you go read old texts, which I love to try to find the oldest things I can get my hands on for the simple reason that it doesn't have the modern edit, or at least a lot of it doesn't. And not only that, it's often written in a language that doesn't require the modern edit because you've got to work at it to understand it. But if you read things like the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, those guys are basically hearkening back to the biblical idea of a firmament in the sky, which is a solid thing. That's basically what he's talking about. He refers to the stars as glowing nails or something in the firmament like this. And while I can't tell you what it is, I can tell you there's a lot of evidence that should have people questioning the version we've been told. Have you ever heard of this Dollard guy? Apparently a real bright scientist man who I guess lives out of his car now. He had some very interesting things to say about light in space. And the reason I found it interesting is because I had seen this NASA book. It was the complete compendium on the sun, and none of it was in visible light. There wasn't a single image of the sun in visible light, and these were all supposedly taken from low Earth orbit and these other places. And what Dollard said was, outside of our atmosphere, the only place that you could see light was reflected off something. So if the moon was a rock, we could see that because light would reflect off a rock. But he said if you turned around and looked at the sun, you would see nothing because nothing is reflecting off it. It's emitting light. And the whole idea of that stuck with me just because of the research that I've done and looked so carefully at what NASA has presented us with, even down to the Hubble images. I mean, very few people understand that those are all constructs. Almost, much of what NASA hands us is created imagery. I did a clip not too long ago about one of the Apollo images took that snapshot of Earth, not the blue marble from the moon, but the one that's in all the textbooks where it shows Earth taken from space from Apollo, I forget which one. Funny thing about that is it's not a real image. And what's really funny is, now Neil deGrasse Tyson not too long ago was talking about the Earth being more pear-shaped. And even though he's saying weird things like it's almost imperceptible and this and that, there's no getting away from. No, you guys handed us this image, told us it was a snapshot of Earth from space, and we see a perfectly round sphere, and yet we now know There are no snapshots of Earth from space. You can't find one. Everything you are handed is a created, constructed image. You will see words like mosaic. You will see words like from telemetry data. You will see all these kind of codey words that are basically telling you this is not a snapshot. And again, if I was in a position to take those images, I would make them as, the sweetest image I could get, and it would be a snapshot, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you take a picture of Earth from space when you're going off to Mars to put a rover there? Wouldn't you turn around, get that great image of the moon orbiting Earth? We don't have these things. It's just further evidence.
How about just one single 360 on the moon? I mean, I know if I was standing on the moon with a camera in my hand, I'd be spinning all around going, oh my God, guys, check this shit out.
The problem is if you did that, you'd start to see lighting, stagehands, and rigging.
Oh. You mean it wasn't real?
Unfortunately, I am one of the people on this planet that spent a good portion of my younger life learning worthless information, and
yeah,
that's a drag, but at least I know better now.
A lot of us in that boat.
Yes, a lot of us are in that boat, and a lot of us are looking for a shift right now, so to speak, of something better to happen. If it's spirituality or what it is, they feel things going to get better. What do you suppose might happen once people start learning all of this, and this comes true to them, and we live in a bubble? I mean, are they going to still have hope? Are we going to have hope of things getting better?
Well, I think yes. I mean, if the answer is no, then why are we doing this interview, right?
Right.
I think the absolute answer is that people have an innate ability that is so incredible that we can't imagine the abilities we have because they've been suppressed. We have not been evolving, whether that's even a thing, which it probably is not. We have been devolving. De-evolution. It reminds me of the band Devo. That's what they were called, de-evolution. That's what's been going on. You think back to, I've got friends that I know now that are in their 70s. When they were in Catholic school, they were taught Latin, Greek. These people know quite a few language. Now you look at what the kids are being taught, and you can absolutely see the dumbing down from generation to generation. You think of what a Renaissance man was. It wasn't just the 6 languages he knew. It was all these things that he was taught. We're not like that anymore. And the reason, in my view, is because we have an incredible ability. For some reason, the species of human beings have almost like this godlike ability that scares the crap out of the people that are controlling us. And I think what we're going to see is the jig is kind of up. There are a lot of us who have become aware to the point where I can't imagine another presidential election in this country following that cookie cutter, kind of pattern we've seen all our lives. It's like something has to be done differently now because too many of us are onto it. But if you consider the 50s, where this kind of coded game of control was going on then, but it was much, much deeper below the surface, and the people were in a much deeper slumber. So now, wouldn't you expect to see it become more covert, when in fact what we see is it becoming more overt? So when you see that, you can only draw the conclusion that probably the people in control think they've kind of passed a point of no return where they can't be stopped. That's one kind of sense that I think about sometimes. The other thing is that there's no holding back the tide. The tide's coming in. There will be a high tide, and no wall you build is going to stop that. But I have a feeling that they will do everything in their power to attempt to interfere with it. And we already see this. They're putting stuff in our water. People are drinking fluoride. They're spraying stuff in our air for whatever reason. The quality of our food is just, if you live in poor places in this country, you're not even really eating food anymore, are you? And that has an effect. As a matter of fact, there's some reports out that are demonstrating over the past 10, 20 years, the sperm count in men in the Western world has gone down 50, 60%. And I think these things are directly attributable to corporations that provide the services on this planet. Even if you consider wireless technology, you know, all these things that we are surrounded by, they're not good for us as human beings, and they're certainly not good for spiritual advancement. And entertainment is apex at that. It introduces so much violence and conflict and human emotion that if that wasn't there, you know, that kind of thing wouldn't enter into your life on an average lifetime, at least not very much. So I think the short answer is, yeah, it's happening, and the unfortunate short answer is I think they're going to do everything they can to interfere.
Well, the good thing about it is we all come together. There's endless things we can do to fight them. I mean, we outnumber them.
Well, I think that's a big, you know, see, this is kind of the Hollywood construct all the way back to the Wild West. Sure, let's go out high noon, draw down with these bastards. But really the truth is that's should not be a normal human response. It's been conditioned into us to be just, okay, we're taking these bastards out. They deserve it. What we should be doing is recognizing the problem for what it is and just resisting it. The truth is if you want to fight, you're going to find out what technology is really about really quick. But if you want to resist, that's a whole other thing, because someone resisting cannot necessarily be blown away because they're resisting. Someone in a street hucking bottles with 1,000 people behind them, that's not a very difficult thing for technology to deal with. So my point of view would be the name of your show tonight is an important name. I mean, that's what I base everything I do on, is the 100th monkey. Once you introduce something into the consciousness stream, if it has value, it will continue to go on and grow and spread, almost like a virus, through the population. So I think that is the goal. Make them aware so when the shenanigans start up, they're not fooled. When the lies start pouring out of the trough, they just recognize it for what it is. And the truth is, the prison that we find ourselves in, pretty much the bars of that prison are built out of belief, if you think about it.
Yeah. You know, and I'm seeing more and more, you know, every single day there's more people getting into gardening, more people learning about food, more people learning about the environment that they live in, more people open up to different ways of thinking anyways. You know, so I just see it as, you know, everybody's just going to pack up their toys and go home and stop playing the game with them. You know, if we didn't have this prison construct that we live in right now, you know, how much would we really need to do? You know, I mean, you need to, how we used to live, you know, 2,000 years ago is completely different than how we live now. I mean, the amount of time we spend away from our home, away from our families, just to make some money so we can pay for our home, to pay for the little piece of property we live on, and to pay for the GMO infested foods that we eat. You know, I mean, I just don't see it, you know, continuing this cycle for very much longer. You know, and I definitely don't see some kind of physical revolution, you know, going to war or anything like that. But I see it as people waking up, and you know, and the way to fight back is not to literally fight, but to, you know, fight with your internal self, or not even fight with your internal self, but come to terms with what it is and how you're going to move past it. Because, you know, I mean, like you said, if you're on the street corner throwing Molotov cocktails at the cops, you know, you're just going to get blown away. But if you're, you know, back and you're with a group of people and you're gardening and you're talking about these things and you're uplifting your community, which in turn uplifts, you know, the grander community, you know, how much of that can be touched? You know, if you're saying, I'm not gonna fight you, I'm not gonna do anything, but I'm just not gonna play your game anymore.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a true thing. An individual who has begun to rise in the abilities of a human being has more resources just in the mind alone that he did not have prior to that junction. And when you have large groups of people, there's almost like a whole new toolbox at your disposal that was not just invisible before, it wasn't present. And I think that's a critical thing, you know, leveraging off what you just said. At the end of the day, it's clear that there are a number of people that are lifting up. And if you look at the children, say, born in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you see a marked difference from these children that were born, say, 94, 95, 96. These kids have abilities that their parents never had and never will have. They used to call them indigo children, and there used to be other words for these special children. But now it's becoming a very common thing. But the sad point is, and even Hattie Bob talks about it in his genome, you know, early on when I was running my channel, so many people would come in with the attitude of, you know, to heck with all the people who don't get it. And I used to say, well, wait a minute, you need those people. I think the sad reality is that we are going to see probably a majority that just, for whatever reason, whether Hattie Bob is right, whether it's genetics, whether it's, I don't know what it is, that just are not going to stand up soon enough. And there's going to be a reckoning. You know, there will be, you know, I don't want to use words like natural selection, but there are going to be people who caught on earlier, who are better prepared for the changes that we see occurring, and better prepared to deal with the onslaught of these basically just cold-hearted people who don't seem to have a lot of conscience. You know, they don't really seem to be concerned with the populations they're supposed to be governing. Yep. Those people will be better prepared to deal with it, and I think the real truth is, whether or not Hattie Bob is right, I think we will see billions of people who just cannot understand what is happening.
Yeah, you might be right there. You know, I'm optimistic that, you know, that whole hundredth monkey effect. You know, I ever since before we started this show 5 years ago, I was that image of like a light switch being flipped on for all of humanity, that collective consciousness, something that connects us and is able to bring a certain awareness, and I don't know what that awareness is, which one it is. I can think of a dozen just right off the top of my head that would be a huge game changer on the planet. But I still hold that image, and I guess that's the energy that I want to put out, is I want to see that light, that switch flipped, and all of us just all of a sudden go, oh, wow, we are really connected, aren't we?
You know, there's an interesting idea that I considered this years ago. If you consider back in, say, the 1800s, the speed of everything. If you wanted to go somewhere, you got on a horse or a carriage, and that was the speed of it. If you wanted information, it was not coming to you quick. It was very limited and localized what you could get. If you wanted your food, that was slow coming to you too. You had to grow it, you had to hunt it, you had to do whatever you did. But there's a direct parallel, an allegory about human beings in what I'm about to say. Those people lived at a much slower pace, and in a sense, who they were was tuned to that speed of existence. If you fast forward to where we are now, transportation is quick. Information is mind-boggling. It's at the speed of light nearly coming down those wires, and there's no limit to what you can get your hands on. Food, it's everywhere all year round, even though the quality may not be what we want it to be all the time. The point is there's a parallel to the speed at which our society is moving that directly correlates to the individuals living in that time. But the allegory that I use is, if you took the people that are now in this very hyper-fast speed that we find ourselves in, and you separate them from all the technology around us, the individuals that will continue to move at that speed are really the ones that are going to be best prepared. Whereas the other ones that are going to require that iPhone, they're going to require that internet connection, you know, all the things that are the trappings of the speed. But I think there's a direct relation to this kind of awakening and the spark we see in human beings to the actual physical speed of the, you know, commerce and everything else that surrounds our current culture. And I think that's what we see. And so many of us are now catching on, but just huge numbers. It just seems like they're going to need that iPhone and that internet connection, because without that, they would slow right down.
Yeah, well, we'll see, and hopefully we see it in our lifetimes. And that's something that's another one of those things that that innate knowing that I've always had, is that that I've always known that no matter what, in the end, it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, it's going to be what it's going to be. I mean, it's an important thing to know because it helps people to quit being nervous and afraid. It doesn't matter how you feel about something because the outcome will not be changed because you feel one way or another. And when you can get to the point where you're not really so concerned about something good or bad coming, but you just deal with it, that simple act alone is really a big step forward for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's see. Anything else you want to? Either you guys have anything else you want to throw out there?
I seen one video earlier today where you had caught an orb. I think it was an orb that you had caught, and you ran it through a couple different filtering lenses or whatever you call them. Do you have any more footage like that, or have you been able to see anything inside of an orb or anything in the background of it?
You know, what's weird about the orbs, I think the one you're talking about is like one morning I got out of bed and my wife had already been up and she was already had the camera out and said this orb's been sitting there for, a couple hours, and it was a big orb, and there were chemtrails being laid all over the place. It sat there for a number of hours. We filmed it. But what they always seem to look like is a ball of light. They look really just like that. They look almost like they're self-luminous. Sometimes they seem to change shape a little bit, just like almost like a ball of white energy. And I've not seen structure inside them. And the most unusual thing I've seen from an orb was that one that fired two plasma-looking shots into a chemtrail. Other than that, they all look like luminous balls. And I think some of them are bigger than we think because where I live, they have these turkey vultures, and even the young ones have a 6-foot wingspan. And in one of the videos I caught, there were these turkey vultures in frame, and the difference in altitude wasn't significant. And at the time, I was thinking, wow, maybe these orbs are 6 feet in diameter or something. But anyhow, that's about all I know about them.
Yeah.
So, anything else that we missed touching on tonight that you'd like to get out there?
Well, anyone who wants to see my work can come to YouTube and to the Crrow 777 channel. There's 2 R's, so it's CRROW 777. I kind of regret that at times. I think if I had to do over again, I would just call it Crrow after my name. But I write for a living a lot of the times. And my most recent writing is probably going to end because they're trying to force me to regurgitate news, and I will not do that. So, having said that, on the Higher Side Chats, I'm writing a 10-article series. So the first of those 10 articles is up on Higher Side Chats. I think it's in his blog section called Crrow's Corner. But there's going to be another 9 coming. Other than that, there's going to be some improved solar filming coming from me because I just got a double stack for my solar scope. And as you all know, there's a critical run up to Easter, and then as we pass Easter, I would urge everyone who has the ability or the interest to try to go out, even if it's just for a few minutes, and film the moon during this time.
Yeah. Looking at the weather report here earlier, I don't think I have a whole very good opportunities up here in the Northwest. So
yeah.
Although I get up so damn early. I wake up at between 2 and 3 o'clock every morning. So.
Ouch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's force of habit, I guess. Anyways, I actually sat this morning and there was actually a couple hours of clear sky, and I got the binoculars out and stared at the moon for a while, hoping to see something, and didn't get anything. But it's always cool to look at, anyways.
It's always an interesting game, but man, you got to put in the hours. That's the downside.
Yeah. All right. Well, Crrow, hey, man, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate you coming on here and speaking so candidly with us and our listeners. This is important information, and we are definitely on the front edge of the wave of I don't know, awakening or truth or whatever we want to call it. And some good stuff's going to come out of this. I know it.
Real quick, any thoughts on the blood moon this weekend?
I'm sorry?
Is there any thoughts on the blood moon this weekend?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up. That is a media creation, and it's a bit like a little dark spell they're casting over minds. First of all, everyone should understand, a blood moon is a very archaic term which hasn't been used in forever, but what it was originally intended to mean was at the fall equinox in September, that full moon was referred to as a hunter's moon or a blood moon. The reason for that was the harvest had been done, you couldn't grow things anymore, you were going to have to kill to survive, hence the blood moon. Negative connotation. Not to mention the sun's going to be falling down into winter and the whole fire and ice, winter is hell allegory. What the media is doing, and NASA Goddard is complicit in this, is calling our beautiful spring full moon a blood moon. And when you hear people say this, you should correct them and point out what is being done in the minds of all the individuals bringing this kind of bloody, archaic idea into the rebirth and natural beauty of spring. There is no blood moons anymore because that's an archaic term, and if they're going to use them, they at least need to put them on the right side of the calendar when we're falling into winter. And other than that, I would say I'm going to be out trying to film it. I have clips up on my channel proving that lunar eclipses are manipulated events. We demonstrated on 2 of them that the timing was wrong, which should be like clockwork. Totality time was wrong, start time was wrong, and more than that, we proved on video that with our eyes and with a camera, we could see color. As soon as we put the telescope, and that's just taking a camera to the scope, no magnifying eyepiece, nothing. In other words, making the scope the camera lens, no color. We did this a number of ways over 2 eclipses, and we demonstrated that lunar eclipses are manipulated events.
Oh man, here's your sign, guys. that was. Thank you so much for the blood moon explanation, because that one just come on. All right.
Yeah, it's like spring is supposed to be rebirth, and why is it bloody?
Yeah.
But yeah, we're definitely on that Sunday. We're holding sacred space for the planet, for all of humans that day, just to try to cut those.
You're having a sweat lodge that day too, aren't you?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. LFE's got his own sweat lodge that we do quite regularly. So
cool.
It's a nice experience. So.
Well, don't do it under a blood moon. Do it under a nice, happy rebirth spring moon.
Exactly.
And tell MSNB, Fox, NN to go pound sand because they're a bunch of lying pigs.
There we go. Oh man. All right, Crrow, man. All you listeners out there, his video channel is linked on the info for this show, and I urge you guys to go check out his material and go over to Higher Side Chats and check out his blog over there too. It's good stuff. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank LFE and Greg for joining me here also. And Crrow, keep on keeping on, man. I'll keep the tabs on your channel, and maybe we'll chat again one day.
All right, brothers, thank you for having me on, and just remember, don't believe it unless you should.
There we go. All right, guys, we'll see you guys on the next show. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
How do you wash your sweet potato?
There you go. All right. Good night, everybody.